Good evening, folks. Welcome back to another Monday night live stream. Tonight, as you can see, I'm not alone for a change. It's been a long time since I've had somebody join me on a live stream. Because I think the last time I did it was on a painting stream, and there was some serious technical issues at the other end, and we had to abandon it after about 5 minutes. So, Discourse Miniatures, welcome to the Monday night live stream.
That does not bode well.
Well, everything's been running fine in the background while we've been sitting chatting there beforehand. So yeah, and we managed it when we did our God tier game as well.
That is true. That is true.
So my fingers are crossed. Everything's going to work absolutely tickety boo. So hello, folks. What's everybody been up to? How was your weekend? What are you up to tonight? What is your beverage of choice this evening? What's on your table? Are you doing a bit of hobby? Are you just kind of hanging out, waiting to listen to us two reprobates chatting? What is your plans tonight? And we'll have a little look in the chat and see who we've got. I'm sure there'll be some of your crowd as well come to say hello, so there'll be some names I don't recognise tonight. But we do have Blizzards in. Hello to you, buddy. Lord Maiden, good evening to you as well. We've got Deep Red. We've got Paul Taylor, Super Pumpkin Man, Type 40 TARDIS. Hello to Christian as well. Christian is my mod who's in there just to kind of crack the whip and beat the stick a little bit. So thank you very much, Christian, for coming in. We got Omnifan, we got Colin Wakeland, we got John Estel, B. Davies, we got Carrie in as well, we got Mark, James Bray. Hello to you, mate. You've met James when we were at UK Games Expo. James is the gentleman that came for dinner with us.
Oh, well, hello, James.
So you'll remember James. We got Eon910, we got Kodos is in as well, Jez is in. Mountain Gremlin Games, he says the crossover I've been waiting for. Well, here we are. Here we are to give you the crossover that you've been waiting for.
It's not the first time it's happened, like, in fairness.
No, it's not.
We had the God tier battle.
Well, that was
and then the other God tier battle in the flesh that no one saw.
I actually thought we were going to get each other in the final. I really thought I thought you were going to beat
this close. It was this close. Pleasant Kenobi cheated. There, I'm on record.
If only it was on stream so you could have saw it.
It was really funny. So we both faced each other, right? And we'd both been building ourselves up as the heels. So I faced him in battle, and I was like, I'm going to be the heel. And he was like, no, I'm going to be the heel. And then we both played against one another, and he beat me on a technicality, which I have to admit was like the most heel way to win a battle. So I had to give it to him.
Did he win on like a tiebreaker or something?
Oh, it was exactly that. It was a tiebreaker. So I was winning, and actually I probably could have won an earlier turn, but I misplayed. And then I beat him in a round, and then it rolled over to him. We ran out of time. Yeah. This was the round to settle things. We were both equal, and he was going first. He won. I think they need to sort that out, honestly. I didn't like it either. I won like that in my first game as well against Quipster, and we didn't realize that was a tiebreaker at the time, so it wasn't like I kind of played for it or anything like that. But there's got to be a better way than that. That felt wrong. I would have hated to win the final like that anyway as well, because it was getting close. Yeah, and I think they actually let you run on for a bit longer in the final of the God tier tournament, didn't they? So it could have, if they had stuck to the string. I mean, because they had very tight times in theory. Yeah. So it could have ran on. It could have been settled by a tiebreaker.
It's funny because I was chatting to Mikey about it afterwards, and he said we knew if we'd called time. He went, like, you won. He says, no matter at what point we called it, because of the way the rounds had gone, and I think I had lost turn 2, which meant I would have been taking turn 3 first and stuff. So he said, so like, we couldn't tell you that you were running out of time because you would have known that you were going to win. He says, so we didn't tell you that. So anyway, luckily I won, so it was okay.
It all worked out in the end then, didn't it?
It did as well. Let's have a little look here who we've got as well. Somberlian's in as well. Hello to you. So he's working on some Kings of War starter stuff and hoping for an entertaining evening with you two. Well, I'll tell you what, no pressure here. We'll try our best there, see what we can do. Who else we got? Andy Mitchell. We've got Jonathan Wybone. We've got, is it Scython? Hello to you. Said he's here to support his favourite YouTuber, Discourse. There you go.
Well, thanks, you very much.
Thanks. We got Very Silent Mouse. Good morning to you. We got Bobby Clark, Chris Morley. We got Kodos. We've got loads of folks in tonight. So nice to see some familiar faces and nice to see some new faces as well. So we're going to be kind of just having a bit of a natter tonight. That's kind of the plan. We haven't specifically set any kind of target. I wanted to kind of chat to you. I guess on your channel, and I know most folks will probably be aware of it, but you do have your own channel, and I'm sure some of them have seen it as well. And you talk very much about specific topics and specific kind of sort of, how can I say this? Like specific topics is the right thing, rather than talking about sort of you and your background so much. You do your live streams as well?
Yeah, I do the live stream. So certainly, in terms of the topics, I try to keep everything as relevant as possible to sort of contemporary issues in miniature wargaming, for sure. Which means that I cover a lot of Games Workshop stuff, because boy, Games Workshop like to pump out the news. And to be frank, I think that this is actually a concern that I have a little bit in terms of the miniature wargaming hobby. That most people, I think that you would actually find that most hobbyists perceive themselves as a Warhammer hobbyist as opposed to a miniature wargaming hobbyist. And in fact, I think that a lot of people don't even know that there is a greater miniature wargaming hobby. There is Warhammer to a lot of people. For example, if you go onto the Twitch and you see at the Twitch categories, I saw someone hobbying on Star Wars Legion under the Warhammer category.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of a problem, right? Like, because we have a single brand that controls the entire conceptual space of a hobby itself. So I cover a lot of Games Workshop stuff, but I like to talk about other miniature war games as well. I know obviously here on your channel, you cover a lot of other games.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, I've kind of dabbled with Games Workshop stuff, like sort of from time to time when something's taken my interest, and I wouldn't kind of classify myself as somebody who's kind of anti Games Workshop or anything like that. Yeah. But I'm certainly kind of. I think my journey into the hobby was maybe a little bit different to others, that I didn't really start with Games Workshop so much. It wasn't really like my first experience of playing a miniatures game or a competitive miniatures game wasn't with 40k, for example. So I think that's maybe why
you're a unicorn.
That's apparently so. Yeah, apparently. I've been called many things, never that. But I guess it's something I want to kind of touch on later on as well. I want to talk about that kind of that Warhammer almost being default hobby, because I think it influences what we do as well, and it makes it quite difficult to showcase other stuff as well. Even though we both play a lot of other stuff, it's not always kind of the best thing for us as content creators to not talk about it, for example.
It's hard. So 100%. Like this, I think that a lot of us are complicit in this brand identity that Games Workshop have found themselves in pushing themselves as the sort of major component of the miniature wargaming hobby. In a lot of ways, I mean, for myself, when I was younger, and we might end up talking about this a little bit more.
Let's start here. Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, whenever I was younger, I started with Warhammer 40k, but I got in through the video games. I was always vaguely aware of Warhammer 40k because there was a Games Workshop store I live in Belfast. So there was a Games Workshop store and I'd walk past it as a kid. So I was always curious about it, walking past with all the little toy figurines, because it always looked really cool. It looked kind of forbidden in a way, very adult, but it was like a toy store for adults, right? So obviously as a kid, you kind of want to get into that. And funnily enough, actually, just sideway, a little bit of fun trivia. If you Google the word Games Workshop store and you look at the very first Games Workshop store that comes up on Google image search, that is the Warhammer store that I used to walk past all the time. It no longer exists, but that is the store. So
you've managed to influence Google's analytics even that far now?
No, more like they have. But and it's kind of funny because it's like the only, as far as I'm aware, it's the only Games Workshop store in Belfast. They've since moved location now.
Okay.
But I got into the game, so I always saw it. I was always kind of vaguely aware of it. I don't think there's ever any time in my life where I wasn't like at least vaguely aware of the Games Workshop. But I never got into it really. And then I played the game Dawn of War, because I always used to love video games. I used to love RTS games like Command and Conquer, StarCraft. I played Dawn of War. That was my first brush with the Warhammer, and I read through the faction, like the manuals. I don't know if you ever played video games back in the day. But you used to get these big manuals with all the video games. And I used to
look how old I am. Of course, I played video games back in the day.
You're younger than me. You're only 21.
Yeah. I've got pants that are almost 21.
But I've started telling people I'm 14 for no reason. But why are you being so mean to me? I'm only 14. So I would read the games manuals on the bus. And I remember reading up the factions, being like really interested. And that's what got me inspired to check out Warhammer, to check out Games Workshop. And that was like the first time I'd ever been aware of miniature wargaming outside of like see like model railways on TV or something, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how I got into it. And then I was in the Games Workshop ecosystem for like the longest time. And what I always believed was there was like Warhammer, which was cool and awesome, and there was historicals, which was for crotchety old men. And that was the hobby to me. I wasn't aware of any other games, and certainly the Games Workshop employees never told me about it. They never wanted to volunteer that information.
No, of course not.
And I suppose at the time, I really couldn't have done much for that information anyway, because I would hobby mostly at the Games Workshop store.
Yeah.
That was like the hobby place. I don't think that's quite true anymore, because you've got online stores now. It's kind of everything's a little bit less centralized. But back in like the 2000s, in the mid 2000s, the late 2000s, it was all at the Games Workshop store. So you were buying Games Workshop products.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
I was concerned.
Even for me, like I kind of got into it into my early 30s, really, kind of, and it was more about just I needed a hobby. I had 2 young kids. Wasn't going out anymore on weekends and all that kind of stuff. Needed a hobby, and walked past the Games Workshop store and remembered them from being a kid. Never really played it, but kind of had friends who had older brothers who played it and stuff. And I decided to pick up some models, and they were purely just to paint. And I ended up with a collection big enough that I thought I should probably learn how to play this thing. Took it to a hobby store, to a local gaming club, which was like at a church hall. Somebody gave me an intro game, and it was awful. I hated it. Like I kind of, and I've said this loads of times now, but I now know, looking back, the guy that kind of gave me the demo game was pretty much just cheating, wanted to win, smashed me off the board turn 2 kind of thing.
Why does this happen? Why do people do these games?
I had to just take it. Like I had to take what he was saying was fact. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to play the game. I'd never bought a rule book or anything at this point.
One of my most biggest bugbears, like one of the things I hate the most in this hobby, are people who are so obsessed with winning that they defeat people who are like, I would like a demo game, please. And they're like, sure. And then they alpha strike you off the table. That's not a demo game.
That was it.
Like there's no glory in that victory.
None at all. But it opened my eyes, because when I went to that club, I saw lots of other games being played, and then the next day I kind of went, or that evening I went home, looked online, found all these other things, put my Space Marines on eBay, and I never really kind of went back to 40k. I've tried a couple of times, but I've never. It's never really. I don't have that like sort of rose-tinted glasses or that nostalgia to draw me back to it. So I've always really kind of sort of played a wide mix of games and stuff. Yeah.
You are unique though. You've skipped like the standard life cycle of a hobbyist, because I think that most people they start with Warhammer, they get into Warhammer, they play Warhammer for a while, but they slowly grow disillusioned with the pricing structure, with the gameplay. Yeah. They can't keep up with it, and then they end up moving on into other game systems, right? And I think this is why we actually see a lot of resentment in the wider community, is because I think that a lot of people end up feeling like they've been taken for a ride a little bit by Games Workshop, because they don't realize that there's this wider ecosystem of other companies that are trying to compete on price and value. Whereas Games Workshop doesn't necessarily need to do that, because it has I call it like a killer app. Yeah. The way that video game consoles, if they come out with this incredible video game that everybody wants to play, people will pick up that games console just to play that exclusive game. And people will do that with Warhammer because they want to play in the Warhammer universe, because the Warhammer IP is so strong. It's such a great IP. And so therefore, they have that as a killer app, and they know that, and they leverage that, and they command higher prices as a result.
But the weird thing is that seems to be a controversial thing to say, like to be able to kind of say that actually people are not like sort of indoctrinated, but people are like, that's the whole point of the way kind of branding and recruitment into things works. That's the whole point. That's how it's designed to work, and every other games company would love to replicate it as well.
They would.
Yeah. Like let's not make any bones about it. This is not like evil GW and everybody else is kind of like sort of the greater good. This is a case of like, it's their businesses, and they're all trying to make as much money as possible. And yes, some people might have different motivations to get there, but I think when a company gets to a certain size, shareholders start taking over and corporations start taking over, and things change from where they used to be. And I think that's true of any business.
100%. I do think that definitely in terms of, I think Games Workshop are probably the most aggressive. They place the most onerous pressure on consumers because they are a public company and they have shareholders and they have priorities that are beyond the ken of mortal man. i.e. they have to do things that necessarily aren't great for hobbyists and they aren't great for consumers because they perceive themselves as being in the position that they have to do it. So to give you an example, I mean, they're not going to stop bringing out codices tomorrow because they're used to that cash flow injection. They know that people buy them. So they have to bring them out because there would be a reduction in revenue. And if there's a reduction in revenue, that's bad because shareholders will ask questions. If you're a private company, you can get away with that a little bit easier because you can be like, you know what, I'm the owner. I don't want that anymore.
You can swear. It's fine.
Yeah. Just, I didn't know how family friendly it was, Andy.
It's past the watershed. It's after 9 o'clock. We're all right.
Oh yeah, of course. It's like, why is it so late?
Yeah. but
past the watershed.
That's it. I know. Watch the numbers climb now after saying that. No. But no, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
But that said, though, I will say this much. There are a lot of companies in the miniature wargaming hobby who seem like they actively don't want to make money. And there's something very admirable about that. Like their websites will be as if they're Angel Fire websites from 1999. And you click on the pictures and it's like, it looks like dial-up slowly loading in.
I think there's a lot of that. And I think we all assume that, I think everyone knows Games Workshop, biggest company in the kind of the tabletop, like when it comes to miniatures games, biggest company out there, shareholders, share price, all the things that go with it. We know they've got lots of, they've got their own manufacturing site. We know they've got lots of employees, and they've got stores everywhere. And I think a lot of people misunderstand the sizing gap between them and everybody else. Like there are a lot of companies out there who we buy their miniatures, we buy their rule books, we play their games, and they're literally like one guy who's still doing it part-time every evening and weekend while he's running a full-time job as well and trying to look after a family and everything else. And I think it's quite easy to forget just the difference in scale between a lot of these companies. Even the likes of Warlord and Mantic are big, inverted commas, he says, but they're not big. Like they're like Mantic's like 25 people or something like that, and some of them are probably freelancers. Like they're not huge kind of sort of global businesses in that respect.
The gulf between them is massive.
Yeah.
Now, I'm very big on one-page rules. I'm very big. I really like one-page rules because I think that they are a great gateway from Games Workshop into the wider miniature wargame ecosystem, which I think is exactly what we need.
Yeah.
Because one-page rules, for those who don't know, very quickly, it's a very simplistic, I think, at first blush system. It's very easy to play, very accessible, and it's designed literally to be usable with Warhammer miniatures. So it means that if you're someone who is maybe a little bit fed up with Warhammer, you could then take your miniature collection and play it in one-page rules, which is kind of great, right? Because Warhammer, I think, relies a lot of the time on the sunk cost fallacy, which is great, and it's also free to play as well. So there's no barriers to entry there. And it's very easy to get other people to play it with you as well because it's such a quick and easy game to play, and it's free to play. And I think that they are actually one of the big sort of threats to Games Workshop in the long term. But I mean, let's keep things in perspective here. Games Workshop are making like billions. Well, I think millions. I think they are at the billion stage in terms of their actual revenue. And one-page rules is like thousands, right?
Yeah.
So, they're not even in the same. They're not pitching in the same ballpark. Conceptually, I think they are a threat, but I think that's so long term that it's not really. It's not like a big deal to Games Workshop right now. I don't think they even really notice them.
But I think it's funny because there's a comment here. Andy Mitchell is just saying in the chat here, Games Workshop are a business who happen to make war games. The smaller firms are often run by people who have a real passion for the game universe, models, and the rules they're creating. And whilst I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, we haven't got to forget Games Workshop started off as a company where the people they didn't get into this to make billions and be a big corporate. They got into it for the love of the game, and they grew because they were probably around that time almost the only player around when it comes to like fantasy war game rules.
Yeah,
they were the distributor for D&D in the UK.
That's right.
So there's a bit of water under the bridge there. So everybody starts somewhere. So I don't think they started with the kind of like with the evil empire kind of like mission plan kind of thing. They weren't out there to build a Death Star kind of thing. But But I think some of these other companies as well, we haven't got to forget, is like they're still trying to make a living. They're still trying to support families and support employees and make a profit and make it sustainable. So we can be idealistic about a lot of it, but they are still businesses.
I mean, I don't begrudge a business attempting to make money. I mean, the current system that you have to, right? Yeah. But I suppose whenever I perceive the actions of businesses, I perceive them from a consumer first perspective, right? Like I understand why a lot of businesses do the things that they do, but I can disagree with them, and I can talk about the impact that has on consumers, because frankly, I mean, the businesses get a lot of apologists already. I think it behooves us not to think about why these actions work. For example, things like exclusivity in box sets, consistent price raises. You know, these things aren't good for consumers, and I think it's important that we talk about that and why it's not good, because otherwise you do get into a position where there are people out there who will defend those actions for no real reason other than just simple brand loyalty, or they want to, you know, or emotionally that maybe they have invested in the system. Maybe they like the game system, they want to play the game system, and they don't want people to be like put off the game system because they're fans of the products.
I think sure. There's always an element as well of I've sunk a lot of money into this, and I don't want people thinking I'm stupid for doing that. So but I think what I would say as well, you were saying about calling people out on this kind of sort of behavior and stuff. I think what's interesting about the sort of the stuff that you talk about is I think me and you have very similar sort of opinions in the end goal of the conversation, if you like, but I think we get to them in maybe different directions. You'll go one route and I would go a different route, but we end up in the same place. And I find it really interesting because I spent years in corporate boardrooms and kind of like working for big business and looking at shareholders and looking at profits and looking at all of that kind of stuff and seeing it from a business point of view. And what's interesting is I might seem more business. I know I might seem more business apologetic, but I think it's more a case of, well, actually, I've been on that side of the table, and I know it's never as kind of simple as people think it is. But then we do end up getting to that same point. We still agree that it's not necessarily right for people.
Whenever I think of things, like, because I can, for example, like Kickstarter, I can see it from both sides. Yeah. Like, I can see why it's so useful, you know? But whenever I always think of things, and it comes down to these two competing principles, I always just think, you know, my guiding light, my like North Star for my channel is consumer first, dev second at all times. You know, it might be good for developers, but if it's not good for consumers, I will not agree with it, because I'm sorry, consumers are real people. Like we get the market that we allow, you know?
I think what gives me a slightly different spin on it is I worked for a lot of time in product development. So I was always this kind of middle ground between the salespeople want to sell this thing, the marketing people want to sell something slightly different, the manufacturing people want to make something slightly different, and it was my job to pull all of these different teams together and sit them all down in one room and go, look, what does the customer want? What does the customer actually want? What do we want to design that is somebody is going to buy, and then can we make it? Let's not start with what machines have we got and what can we produce, and let's not start with, I've got a really good marketing strap line, let's build something around that kind of thing. It was my job to try and kind of be that middle ground. So I think that's why we end up getting to the same point, is because I've always, even sitting on that kind of boardroom table, it was always around, well, what does the customer want? Because if you make a good product at the right price, people will buy it regardless. It doesn't, like, you can market it and you'll sell more, or you can do a really bad job of marketing and you'll not sell any, no matter how good it is.
Or you can go on Kickstarter and make absolute millions.
but fundamentally, you have to have a good product. Otherwise, what happens is you get, I guess the equivalent in our world would be clickbait, where basically you say it's one thing and it's not. So there you go.
It's all marketing. I mean, ultimately, it's all marketing, right?
It is, exactly, but it has to live up to what the customer is expecting of it as well.
There has to be substance there.
Exactly.
There has to be substance there for sure, which is why so few people play Warhammer. Like, lots of people paint them and lots of people collect it, but like, very few people actually play the Warhammer game.
Well, I think it's an interesting point, because for a long time, I think even Games Workshop themselves basically, like, sort of said, well, you know, we're a model company first, and I still think to this day that because we're now we're surrounded by YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and everything else, we're here talking about people talking about the gaming, and we're here talking about events, and because that's that's the thing that moves quite fast and gives people something to talk about.
Yeah.
That's the bit that you hear. That's where the noise comes from. We talk about the competitive side of things, which armies are playing really well, who's winning what kind of thing. And I still think that we don't really. I think we'd all be surprised if we saw the numbers of just how many people never play a game. Never ever play a game.
It's like, I think it's like 99% of people have never played a game of Warhammer, like ever. I think it's like 90% of people. I think 60% of people have never bought a model. They just like Warhammer. And then 90% of people have like never played a game. But, and a good way to tell this actually is if you look at the numbers on YouTube, if you look at the people who make lore for Warhammer, they're like getting like hundreds of thousands of views. Then you look at the painters. Painters are getting like hundreds of thousands of views, maybe a bit less than the lore YouTubers. Then you look at the gameplay oriented YouTubers. It's like 30K views. Like that's the difference.
What's interesting is the amount of lore YouTubers who have huge numbers and I have never heard of. They've never been recommended to me. I've never seen them in my feed. Like every now and again I'll come across one, I'll think, like, who the heck's this? Like, how come they're getting like 250,000 views off a lore video? And when you have a look at the channel, like they've got hundreds of thousands of subscribers. It's like,
the lore is. If have you ever heard of Wes Hammer? He's no. Well,
there's a prime example.
Creator.
Yeah.
He covers lore. He's a really good. He covers lore really well. In my opinion, I actually really like his content. But he covers lore for Warhammer 40K, and he's got millions of followers on TikTok. Like millions. Of course, he had to go to YouTube because, like, if you're on TikTok, you're not making any money at all from the creator fund. But he's not on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing, right? There's actually a huge marketplace for lore with Warhammer, which, whatever you think about that. And you start to think about, Warhammer Plus and animations and TV shows, and you kind of start to realize why Games Workshop are really interested in actually expanding the IP and trying to license it and trying to make it a more kind of marketable, more palatable kind of
I mean, kind
of for audiences.
Exactly, love it or hate it. They know they've got something on their hands, which is the crux of why they make money. It's not their games. Their games is people might play the games and people buy their rules and all that kind of stuff. But let's not get away from the fact that is not the core business model. That's not where they make their money. Like, that's why they license it out with video games. It's why they're making merchandise. It's why all of these other things exist.
There's people out there who think that Games Workshop want to get out of the miniature business, but they never do, right? Because why would they? They make a killing in miniatures. Like, they make tons of money in miniatures. They're making a lot of money off of them. But it's not, I think that overall, if you ever read any of their actual business reports, if you read any of their annual reports, they always refer to the IP as their biggest asset. It's not the miniatures, it's not the designers, it's nothing else. The IP is the big asset, and that's what they sell. They sell the IP. That's what they care about. Like, that's what they actually talk about to shareholders.
And to be fair to them as well, like they've spent a long time building that up. I mean, look at Warhammer Fantasy, how long it's like that kind of IP's been around.
Yeah.
Even though the game system, if you like, or the model range has kind of been sideswiped a little bit, and unsurprisingly, it's now going to come back with the old world. Like it still hangs around in Total War. It's like you still see it in in Vermintide and all the other bits of games. That's kind of like, it's such a rich background. It's not my bag. It's like, but then I'm not really into that kind of fantasy background stuff. Sure. It's not my bag, but it is super popular, and it allows for some super creative stories and worlds and all manner of kind of different things. I'm surprised we haven't seen more from the animation side of things. I'm surprised we haven't seen something more. I guess if you look at how badly things like Dungeons and Dragons films have done and Warcraft films have done, maybe there's a bit of nervousness about that, but about going down that route.
I've been very critical of Warhammer Plus, and the reason for that is because I think it was a massively missed opportunity by Games Workshop. I mean, like, even from their perspective, I think they totally dropped the ball on it, because they could have actually engaged with a third-party company like Amazon or someone like that to work on expanding that out to a more mainstream audience. Like, I think that would have been much better from Games Workshop's perspective. It would have actually served a purpose. But what they have been concerned about, and this is like one of the big bugbears I have with Games Workshop. Okay, I'm sorry. I come on your channel, I start ranting about Games Workshop. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But
we've got all night. Don't worry about it.
The thing is, one of the big major problems I have with Games Workshop, they are very preoccupied with trying to monetize existing users. because they've always relied on the game stores, like on the high street, to be their way of bringing in new customers. And I think they've very much gotten used to that. And now that's kind of transferred into, well, we've got the video games out there. People will play the video games and come into the hobby. Sure. I mean, sure. From Warhammer perspective, I guess that's kind of okay, but you're only getting certain people who'll come into it and things like that. And they're so preoccupied with working out how to monetize the people that exist to just constantly try and aggressively get as much cash from them as possible before they inevitably leave the hobby. Like, I believe that Games Workshop have this conception of if you work in product, then you know about lifetime value of a customer, right? And I think that is all. Games Workshop understand that there is a certain lifetime value of a customer. Customers only survive in the Games Workshop ecosystem for a certain period of time, and Games Workshop are all about trying to maximize the money whilst you spend on that ride. And that annoys me because I don't care about that. I don't care about the profit. I care about the games. I want really good games. I want hobbyists who play Warhammer not to be upset and then leave miniature wargaming. I want them to try out other games. I want them to have enough money to try out other games. I want them to not have so many releases that they have to keep up with, like 6 different, like, pretty subpar games with fine models, I guess, and have to keep up with that so they never ever try anything else. Like, I don't care about Games Workshop profits. I care about the health of the hobby as a whole.
Yeah. No,
priorities.
But I think it's as they've grown into a bigger business, they've adopted bigger business kind of methods of operating, and what they've essentially done is the way they increase their production runs or their production output, I should say, is essentially to basically swamp the shelves of every independent local gaming store, so that basically everyone says, well, Games Workshop stuff sells, your stuff doesn't sell very much, so I'll just replace it with all of the new GW stuff that's coming out. I mean, it's a very, very kind of sort of it's an obvious ploy to make sure that when you go into an independent store, you see how much stuff there is there, and you go, oh well, this must be the game that everyone plays because there's so much of it.
Everything else feels like an off-brand Warhammer product, right? Because everything else is off-brand. There is the Warhammer hobby. What do you do? Oh, I play Warhammer. Not I'm a war gamer. Yeah. Imagine if you spoke to like a person who played video games and you're like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm Minecraft. I'm a Minecraft hobbyist. It's like, what? Like, no, you play video games. You play certain games in the hobby of video gaming, but not with miniature wargaming, right? Like, you talk to people, you go, oh, are you into miniature wargaming? They'd be like, what's that? What's tabletop gaming?
Well, that's a prime example is, obviously, I went to start doing this full time, and when I had to like sort of say it out loud to somebody what I did for a job anymore, I go, like, like miniatures games, and they go, I don't know what you mean. And you go, like Warhammer. Oh yeah, my son used to do that. Or like it's like, oh, like Jesus, like even people who have no idea, it's the power of the brand, isn't it?
It is. It's the same thing. It's the same thing in tabletop role playing games as well, with Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like, if you start telling people, oh, I play Call of Cthulhu, they'll be like, what? You go, Dungeons and Dragons. They're like, oh, okay, I get you. And I guess in a lot of ways, it's what they've managed to do is they've managed to monetize and take advantage of a kind of social phenomenon, in that these games are social hobbies. You can't really do these. I mean, you can obviously paint by yourself, as I well know. But it's hard to. I was gonna say play with yourself, but I mean, we're past the watershed.
Yeah, we're all right.
But it's hard. I mean, now there's a lot more co-op and solo games, but putting them aside for 1 minute, because they're relatively innovative, I think, in the miniature wargaming hobby. They're very exciting, and I really love them. But for most people, they want to play as part of a community. They want to go down to a game store. They want to play with other people, even just a friend at a coffee table. And Warhammer promises permanence. Warhammer promises a community inbuilt there, and they managed to be there first. They were the firstest with the mostest, and they managed to take advantage of that. And now it's hard for other companies to get a foot in unless you have like a local area. Absolutely. Now, I think that in the last 5 years, we're starting to see a change. I think we are starting to see a change in the miniature wargaming hobby. I think we're seeing an expansion of new games, specifically like skirmish games that are very accessible for players. And we're also seeing an explosion in people who are interested in playing other games. So on the one hand, I think content creators have a lot to blame here, including myself. If you go onto my channel, no, not you though, not you, Andy. That's the thing. You're actually exempt. You're not up against the wall.
I'm a unicorn. I forgot.
I am though, because if you go onto my channel and you look at my content, it's a lot of Games Workshop. It's a lot of Warhammer. There is the Games Workshop logo a lot. And to look at my content, you'd think that all I do is talk about Warhammer stuff, but that's actually not. That's my little trick. I actually talk about other games. But how I get the people to hear about other games is that I fool them into thinking it's all Warhammer, and then I go, oh, also I'm playing Carnival this weekend.
But this is the exact point I was going to make when I was saying before, but we'll get onto this, was the fact that we know from what we do the difference. If you put GW logo in a thumbnail, if you put Games Workshop in a title, if you put Warhammer in a title, it is night and day between the amount of people that will click on a video and the ones that just don't. And there is a way of trying to show people that there are other games out there, like, because you're not necessarily trying to tempt Games Workshop players away from Games Workshop. It might be a knock-on effect at some point. Some people will be looking for other stuff, but what you're trying to do is those people that are just looking for like sort of game stuff, more information, games, they only know of Games Workshop a lot of the time, and it's that breaking through to just give people a choice. If they want to play Games Workshop stuff, absolutely fine. You choose and you buy and you spend your money on whatever you want to do, but just be aware that there are other things out there. There's other flavors of crisps. You know what I mean?
I get a lot of private messages and emails from people who say things like, I never thought I could afford to play miniature war games because all I knew was Warhammer, and I can't afford Warhammer. I didn't know that there was other games, and they thank me for that, and that feels really good. Like that I've managed to get somebody into the miniature wargaming hobby. Like honestly, like I think people think I've got some sort of vendetta against Games Workshop. I don't care if you get into the hobby through Games Workshop. I got into the hobby through Games Workshop. I still play Warhammer 40k, shock horror, even 9th edition. I still play Warhammer 40k. I play Age of Sigmar, for God's sake. Like I don't care about people who play the games. The games are kind of fine. Like they need work, obviously. It's clear the designers have a lot of love for it, but they're obviously overworked. There's like a lot of issues with them. I talk about it on my channel. Check it out. But I still play the games. I don't have like an axe to grind with Games Workshop, but I have to point out the things that they do bad, and I also have to point out the things that they do good. It's just that it's really hard to point out the things that they do good when I'm comparing them with other companies that do things so much better.
And I think this is sometimes where kind of maybe you and your channel take a little bit of flack sometimes, because I think people confuse being positive about the game and being positive about the company as the same thing sometimes. You don't have to kind of fall in love with a brand who makes something. Like I don't have to be passionate about Coca-Cola to like the flavor of a can of Coke kind of thing. You know what I mean? I don't have to like sort of have to like, I don't have to agree with everything they do. I'm sure they've got some human rights issues and all the other things that goes on with companies producing it overseas, but let's not go down there. I wear Nike shoes. Do you know what I mean? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So but I'm not this like sudden like Nike kind of sort of like aficionado that would always kind of like start stamping my feet online whenever anybody said anything bad about them. But I think that people, when it comes to hobby, people are so passionate about it that they confuse kind of hobby stuff with real world problems, and all of a sudden they become mega defensive about defending their honor of a company kind of thing. And that's the bit I would agree with you is that the games are the games, the miniatures are the miniatures. Like if you like them and you enjoy them, buy them, play them, paint them, whatever you do. But you don't have to defend a corporation, like kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like I mean, I think that totally people conflate brands with their own sense of identity, and I think in the miniature wargaming hobby, people conflate the brand with their hobby and the time that they spend in the hobby. And so, if, for example, I'm saying that the latest box set from Games Workshop is pretty predatory because it comes with exclusive models. It doesn't need to come with exclusive models. They're pushing the marketing of it. They're making it maybe like a limited edition, or they've put like a rule book that you need inside this massive box set, and they're not going to ever release it for free or separately. So to play the game, you got to like buy way more than like maybe 5 years ago. They would have just released the rule book for free. So things have kind of gotten worse.
Yeah.
And if I'm saying that, like some people take that as if I'm kind of saying that they're trash for buying buying it. Like that they are a bad person for buying it. I'm not saying that.
No.
I'm saying the company for putting you in the position where this is suddenly an acceptable purchase is a trash company. Like, I'm very critical of Games Workshop as a company. That's fine. Like, they can turn things around. Like, they can change their business practices, and I'll good if they do. And I think just to briefly mention, like, a point that we mentioned earlier about the passion. I think that there is a lot of people who are passionate about Warhammer and about the games and about the miniatures inside the company of Games Workshop. Like, I 100% believe that
absolutely,
that is the case.
I don't think anybody starts working at Games Workshop because it's like it's a career choice. It's not like there's either this or I can go and work down the mine kind of thing. It's like there's nobody chooses to work for Games Workshop for any other reason than they really want to work for Games Workshop.
I know a bunch of people who have worked for Games Workshop and they went there because of their passion for the hobby and for the materials that they were working with, like art and things like that. But that said, I will be honest, a lot of them are freelance now, and there is a good reason for that. There really is a good reason for that. And one of the things that you will notice that if you actually look at the executive level of Games Workshop, you're not going to see people with long histories inside miniature wargaming. No. You're going to see people with long histories in accountancy firms, in banks, larger companies, right?
People who were executive level at Hasbro and have come across. You see that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You get people who've been within the toy industry and kind of worked within or within media.
And they're the people setting the decisions. They're making the decisions as to the long-term objective and goals of the company and how they're going to reach that. They're going to say we need more releases. They're going to say we need to focus on these releases. Yeah. Those are the people that I'm criticizing. When I'm criticizing Games Workshop, I'm criticizing the strategy, objectives, and the tactics of Games Workshop. I'm not saying like, oh, this new lore sucks. In fact, I actually quite like some of the new lore. And yes, sometimes I will be like, this lore sucks. But that's my personal opinion. I'm never saying that's objective fact and reality.
That's like going to cinema and saying I didn't like the latest Batman film or whatever it is. I actually did. I was going to say I watched it last night, which is the reason I mentioned it. And it was awesome, but it was the first thing that popped in mind. But that's personal opinions. People can have personal opinions.
Yeah.
It's just that there's something. I'm too old for this shit. I think that's what it is. And I remember the day when people used to like kind of discuss things and have different opinions and then not fall out about it. It seems to be a bit of a lost art these days.
I don't know. Did that ever happen?
It did.
Some good old days stuff. But
what you did was you used to go to the pub and you used to go and sit round a table and you would have a pint and you would go, did you see the match last night? Oh, they were awful. I didn't think they were awful. Like people, like
not just post each other on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't hide at home and just kind of like type away and go, I think you're shit for watching it. So there's none of that kind of stuff. It just feels at the minute like that it is difficult to voice an opinion that is not. And like we're not talking about like controversial subjects here. We're not talking about like the things happening in the US with abortion rights. We're not talking about Black Lives Matter. We're not talking about political movements. We're talking about the law of an imaginary world. We're talking about game systems that are meant to be for fun and for people to enjoy, and a hobby that is for people to kind of take themselves out of day-to-day life and kind of wind down and find some kind of downtime. I find it quite difficult at times that people are overly passionate about it. It's almost as if some people need to find something to really get their teeth into to be angry about, and that's just the thing that's this week's topic kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a fact of the hobby is that there is a massive institution in it called Games Workshop, and they do some pretty bad things that other companies in the hobby don't do, and people are going to talk about that for sure. Like of course that's going to happen. Now that said, there are people out there who just hate the company for perhaps ulterior reasons, but I mean that's a different kind of kettle of fish. I think there's a lot of good faith arguments that you can make against Games Workshop for sure.
And I think we also mustn't forget as well is that because they are so big and their fan base is so big and their player base is so big that if 2% or 1% of your audience are very vocal kind of nut jobs, shall we say, there's going to be more of them in a bigger audience. I'm sure other game systems have them, but they're quieted out because there's so few of them.
This is where a lot of my criticism of Games Workshop comes through, because most people will wander into a Games Workshop store and be like, "Can I have one of the Space Marines, please?" And they'll get the like heavy intercessor squad and get 5 fucking models for $60, and like that's who. So ultimately, I mean, that's who I feel sorry for the parents, right? Because it is, but
Would
it is.
someone
Like,
think of the parents?
its parents are going in to like buy their like teenage kid or like their young kid like some models, and Games Workshop have basically built an entire business off the back of like tricking them into thinking that it's like a reasonable cost for $60 for 5 models. You know,
I wonder how much do you think pocket money is these days? How much do you think kids are getting? Do kids get pocket money anymore? Is that a thing?
I bought a kebab earlier. It was £7. I have no idea what the hell pocket money is.
Oh, I thought you were going to say pocket money was on the kebab ratio, or whatever the price of a kebab is. That's normally how much pocket money kids get. Like when I was a kid, you used to get a kebab for 50p, like that kind of thing. I was wondering if that was like the scale. Yeah,
it was £3.50 for a kebab meal.
Yeah, but like because I remember being a kid, and I did buy like the odd kind of like Citadel miniature from a toy shop nearby. But like it was like the odd one now and again, and I could only afford one like in a blister pack. I wasn't buying boxes of Space Marines and stuff. Like I don't remember it ever being affordable. But I didn't have much money when I was a kid, so maybe that's just me, and maybe that's why I never got into it. Maybe that's why I kind of like skipped that generation, and it was only coming back as like as a grown man with full-time job and like kind of disposable income that it actually ever appeared that it was something I could sink money into.
I actually worked illegally in order to afford Warhammer. Actually, I got a job at the age of 14 in order to afford miniatures. It was like, I worked in a bar. I wasn't allowed to. I lied. I just lied, and I don't know how I got away with it. I lied, and I revealed my age like after I'd been hired, and they just kept me on.
There you go.
I worked in a bar, and I was able to afford miniatures that way, but it was really tough, you know. Like even as a full-time worker, I was like part-time, right? Because I was at school. But even on that wage, like I couldn't afford a lot of models. Like it was tough, you know.
It's funny.
I wish I'd known about Perry miniatures. God damn.
were they a thing back then? Yeah, you're younger than me. Yeah, they probably were.
I don't think so.
But it's funny because I had a Saturday job as well when I was a kid, but I was kind of into video games by that point, and I kind of had a Mega Drive, so like they were like £40 a shot. They were £40 for a cartridge. So I was kind of like I was lumping in all my money into that kind of stuff. So yeah, when we talk about kind of like a new generation coming into kind of Warhammer and into miniature gaming, and we saying it's too expensive for them, I do wonder like. Am I so out of touch with what kids get like money in their pocket these days, or is it just are we just accepting it's a middle class hobby kind of thing, and those parents can afford it? Hobby. Yeah,
it's a middle class hobby. It always has been though. Like this has been the goal of Games Workshop. Whenever Games Workshop were finding locations as to where they put their stores, like they didn't do market research explicitly. What they did was they would find areas that had an early learning center and an M&S, and they would put a Games Workshop store in the same area. And they've been open about that, like now, and that's how they located the stores, because it was always a middle class hobby, and that is one of my big problems. I think that the miniature wargame hobby is transformative, and it's very creative, and it's full of art. And I think everybody deserves to play it. And you know what? Plastic is so cheap that actually working class kids can't afford it. If the middleman got out of the fucking way and made it affordable, right? You look at Perry miniatures; they're selling like 44 miniatures for £22.50. You know what I mean? Like that is the price of that is a fair price for plastic sprues. I don't care. Like the designers for all of these sprues have been paid for long ago. They're still selling tactical marines for like £30. Like no, that's not a reasonable price.
I think it's a fair comment. You might not be able to compare sort of 10 Space Marines to a pack of plastic army men from the pound shop kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you can compare them to other companies making plastic models. Definitely. Just a quick one there. Thank you very much, James Zorn, for the donation there. Much appreciated, buddy. Thank you very much. So we're talking about a lot of these people that are now freelancers and stuff like that, working for Games Workshop or moving away.
Rick Priestley, famously.
Yeah. So, that's the point I was going to make. There are so many of them have gone off and started their own businesses or are freelancing, working for other businesses that, you know, we've got that what used to be called the lead belt around Nottingham, where basically everybody who cut their teeth working for Games Workshop left and went and started their own thing or went sideways. People like Ronnie Renton at Mantic, people like Alessio Caratori at Riverhorse, going across to Warlord, John Stallard at Warlord. There's so many of them have kind of gone off and done their own things. What you've mentioned, you play kind of a bit of 40k and a bit of AOS. What other games are kind of on your list now? The stuff you mentioned, one-page rules. Is there any other big games that you're playing?
So in terms of actual miniature war games, like right now, I'm between houses right now. So I'm living with my parents. So that means there's been a lot of skirmish wargaming going on. A lot of playing on the kitchen table. Back to the olden days. So I've been playing a lot of Carnivale, which is a skirmish war game set in Venice. That's a very fun game. It's very mobile. It's basically Assassin's Creed, the miniatures war game. You're jumping from rooftop to rooftop, leaping onto giant fish monsters and stabbing them. It's a ton of fun. Aside from that, I've also been playing a bunch of Lunar recently as well. It's from BlackJack Studios. It's tough to get in the UK.
I'd never heard of it until I saw you had been painting some stuff.
Yeah. Hey, that's
so,
it.
So tell me what Lunar is, because I've never heard of it.
Okay, so Lunar it's a micro skirmish game. So at most you're gonna have like 5 guys, right?
Okay.
And it's set on the moon. I have to explain this game so often because no one has ever heard of it. It's set on the moon in like the 70s/80s, and it's got that kind of analog design aesthetic, you know, that everything's chunky and there's no microchips. And you're playing as astronauts, and I mean astronauts, like in astronaut suits. They're on the moon, very slow and very clumsy. Well, they're not slow actually, because it's the moon. You can like leap and stuff because there's very low gravity. And basically, you're playing like a mission, and you're from it's an alternative history game. So there's like the Republic of China, there's Russia, the USSR, there's NASA, and there are freelancers, which are like corporations. And basically, it's a world where the Russians were the first people to put a person on the moon. So the space race has gone all completely different. And now everyone's on the moon trying to like get moon rocks and stuff, like doing experiments. And you don't have to necessarily be like a military expedition. You can be like a group of engineers or a group of scientists. And it's very campaign based. It's all about building a wee squad of guys and going out and doing missions against your opponent. Now, it is an absolute chaotic game because you can play soldiers and things, and you will get into conflict because in the game, the Cold War has gotten hot on the moon. Like on the moon specifically, it's gotten a little bit hot, right? Like there's been conflict and as people are trying to vie for territory on the moon, basically for geopolitical reasons. And so you might have a mission where you're like a bunch of scientists who aren't very good at combat, and you have to run over and like collect moon rocks. But you've got like scientific tools. You don't have like weapons. Weapons are really rare on the moon. You might get like a pistol or like a shotgun or something. And so you're like running over, and you're literally grappling one another on the moon, trying to push one another over. And one of the things I love about it is you're wearing these big chunky helmets, so you've got like a limited line of sight. So people can you've got an inventory. You can like throw hammers at people that you've got in your inventory, right? Like you're carrying a hammer, you can like chuck it at somebody. And if you throw it at someone, they can like try and block it and dodge it, right? But if you throw it from them behind, they don't get a chance to dodge it because they can't see you.
See it coming.
They can't see it happening. So I've had games where literally I've like gathered up all the moon rocks and I'm like, right, let's get back to the ship, boys. And we're like trying to jump back to the ship. And then it's my opponent who then spends a bunch more energy, like runs really fast and throws a hammer at me. I get hit in the back of the head, and when you get knocked, everything knocks you down because you're not very graceful at all. And so you get knocked to the ground, and when you fall, when you stumble, you drop everything you carry, which means that all the moon rocks go flying everywhere. They run over, gather up a bunch of moon rocks, and start running in the opposite direction. And it's just this awesome, chaotic game. It's absolute madness. It's so much fun. It's a pretty small game. It's relatively light. It's not hard to play, but there's nice, chunky kind of inventory mechanics. There's a great oxygen mechanic where you can like spend oxygen now. Oxygen is basically actions that you can take, and you spend like 1 oxygen to take 1 action, and you can spend more oxygen now, but then that'll leave you with a deficit later. So you can decide to go all out. It's a lot of fun. It is. It really is a lot of fun.
It feels like it could be like a Mario game.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
In my head, I can when you see Mario kind of running around. In my head, that's exactly what I've got.
What I love is that it's the type of game where there's a bunch of special characters, right, that you can kind of like get in your campaign if you fulfill certain objectives. And one of them is a complete pacifist, and they will not join your crew if you've killed anyone or like have shot at anybody. Like you can only use them if you're totally a pacifist. And if you ever kill anybody, they will leave forever. So there's stuff like, it's the type of game where you can do that sort of stuff. Like there's a lot of like role playing and just kind of fun in it. It's a blast.
I might have to check that out. Honestly, I'd not heard of it until I saw that I think you'd posted something on Twitter to see you'd been painting some stuff up, or you'd been painting something and someone said, "Oh, they're lunar models in the background," and it was like, I haven't even heard of this thing.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. It's from BlackJack Studios. So one of the things I like about BlackJack Studios is I don't like this. They're quite expensive, right? They're a very like boutique company. They're very small. They're They are an indie company, right? And I do forget, like, I treat prices a little bit differently depending on what kind of company you are. And I do think that, you know, a smaller company like BlackJack Studios can probably get away with higher prices because they don't have the scale of, you know, everything's resin. It's all kind of like, you know, but they are very pro-consumer. They actively don't use Kickstarter. And I really admire that in today's marketplace. Like, that is very admirable in my opinion, to not use Kickstarter, because Kickstarter has a ton of problems. I understand why companies use them, but they don't like the idea of building exclusive. They don't like the idea of limited runs of products. They want to be able to just make a good product and sell it, and that is a business I really respect and admire, for sure. And I don't think it exists enough. So I'm a big fan of BlackJack Studios. The problem is they don't have a distributor in the UK, so they're really hard to get in Europe and the UK. And they manufacture everything in America, you know. Yeah. So I think they're looking into a distributor, but I don't think I'm allowed to talk about that. So
it's hard because there are a lot of games out there like that kind, and I don't mean like that kind of like from a sort of concept point of view, but companies where basically they're coming at it from a passion project type thing. It's something they're really passionate about. They know that they want to try and keep it manageable. They want to try and keep it, I say, affordable, but they're not. Let's be honest, they're not making money hand over fist out of higher prices. Yeah. They're covering their costs a lot of the time, and it's so hard to break through. It reminds me, actually, I was watching a podcast. A video podcast. The guy called Stephen Bartlett. Have you heard of him? The guy that he does a thing called Diary of a CEO, and he did an interview with, I forget the guy's name now, James somebody, who owns Brewdog, the brewery. And he was talking about, we're proper off left field here, man. Just go with it. He was talking about how when Brewdog started up, the big companies, basically the Diageos and stuff like that, the big drinks manufacturers, were actively trying to like basically keep them out, stop distribution lanes. They won some award at this like Scottish kind of Brewing Association award. They got tipped off to come and collect this award. They bought tickets for the dinner. When they got there, it was awarded to somebody else, and when the other company got up on stage to collect the award, it had the Brewdog name on it, and it turned out that basically Diageo had said to them 10 minutes before they made the award, if you give it to Brewdog, we won't sponsor this event for the next 5 years, kind of thing.
Oh,
and it's really interesting, this, and I know there's lots of things about Brewdog and about their own kind of issues and stuff like that, but it's interesting seeing how smaller companies trying to do something different, trying to sort of forge their own path, up against big companies who have so much power and so much weight and financial might behind them to just block them off. And this is exactly what happens with you know, when you've got people like Asmodee, who own so many games companies. They pretty much own the distribution rights when it comes to kind of shipping things around the world. Games Workshop pretty much dominate every kind of sort of gaming store. It's so hard.
Yeah.
Because I've chatted to people who have like sort of new games, and they're trying to get a foothold, and they're trying to they're doing that distribution thing themselves, almost trying to talk to each individual game store. You know, will you take a few copies of this? And the game stores, they don't make a fortune. Like they're basically saying, look, I need to put things on my shelf at sell.
Nobody's getting into running game stores for the profit, right? Like, most people are doing that because they're passionate.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's really hard to make it in the traditional path. I think that the future that we're seeing right now, I think there's a little bit of a bubble forming of content creator games. I think we're seeing a lot of content creators come up with their own games because they've got marketing inbuilt already.
They've got a brand, haven't they?
Yeah, right. Exactly. They've got an existing brand.
They've got a brand. They've got an audience. Yeah.
And then they can build into the game. Whereas if you're starting off from scratch, it's really tough. Like, so for example, there is Raid in Hell from Uncle Adam. There is Idols of Torment from Black Magic Crafts.
Yeah, I just saw that one.
If World Collides from NARP, right? So they're only like a few. They're like a few games of like many.
Isn't Dave from Mini Wargaming? He's got one as well, hasn't he now?
Yeah, Ravage Star.
Yeah.
Ravage Star. Yeah. So like I think that is we're going to see a lot more of those as time goes on, I think, from content creators, because it just makes sense. They've already got the marketing. They've already got their like foot in the door, right? They already have, I mean, they have a group of people who are willing to buy products from them if the product is kind of good, right? They have marketing. Marketing is so hard to get in miniature wargaming. It's hard to actually tell people about your products. It really is. Like, how do you find out about other games in this industry whenever like everybody's playing Warhammer and they don't even know that miniature wargaming exists? Like, how do you convince people to try out your miniature wargame? You know,
Absolutely.
And a way to do that is to be a quote unquote influencer.
Well, that's especially over the last few years. I mean, you basically wiped out any kind of conventions for 2 years. You wiped out a chance to get your game in front of people who might not ordinarily see it, who will see it because they've gone to that convention and they walk past your table and that looks interesting. That's a nice table kind of thing. We wiped that out for 2 years. It's almost like resetting and restarting again. And like I'm super passionate about kind of showing people that there's more games out there than just the big guys. But like it is so hard to get people to come look at them sometimes. Like it's like even sort of like even the companies don't do themselves any favors. Like, do you know what I mean? Like sort of interacting on social media sometimes. I know it takes time, but like if you've got no money, if you're a new company starting out and you don't have a lot of money for marketing, you have to use every trick in the book to get it in front of people.
Oh yeah.
You have to. And that's one thing that social media does give them companies. Everybody's got an even footing when it comes to that.
Oh, definitely. And speaking as a content creator, I think that more companies should be reaching out to more content creators, honestly, because I think that's a really big way, even if it's not leading to a ton of conversions, like people aren't buying the product off the back of that. It's exposure. It's getting the word out there. People start talking about it a lot more. I think Mantic have been successful in this, to be honest, because Mantic don't have like a huge IP, right? Like they're just kind of like making their own games over there. It's not like they're Star Wars Legion. Like Star Wars Legion and Marvel Crisis Protocol don't necessarily need to like do a ton of marketing. Like they kind of do. But here is a great example of two different companies that have taken two completely different routes. There is Marvel Crisis Protocol, run by AMG, originally Fantasy Flight Games, but all under the umbrage of Asmodee.
Still Asmodee.
Asmodee, yeah. Yeah, exactly, right. And Marvel Crisis Protocol has a big IP. It's Marvel, right?
Yep.
And they have gotten they're really popular. I think they're the third biggest miniature war game. It's them or Star Wars Legion. They're like neck and neck. They're neck and neck. It goes Warhammer 40k, WizKids, Age of Sigmar, Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars Legion, or Star Wars Legion, then Marvel Crisis Protocol. I can't remember. Anyway, so it's massive, right? I want to contrast that with Night Models. Night Models did a Marvel skirmish game for like 8 years.
Yeah.
Nobody cared.
Nobody
cared. Nobody knew. Exactly. Yeah. There was no marketing about it. Like there was no hype about it whatsoever. You ask people, have you played the Marvel miniatures game? People go, what?
Yeah.
There's a Marvel miniatures game? Is what people used to, honestly, were surprised every single time about the Marvel miniatures game. People were excited to play it. No one knew about it.
But you play Batman from Night Models.
Oh yeah.
And there's another game as well that is like vastly underrepresented. I mean, Batman, let's be honest. I mean, let's take away the Marvel kind of like the MCU type stuff. Batman is as big as it comes when it comes to kind of IPs. I'm a massive Batman fan. I actually used to have a Batman tattoo. Like when I was 16, I had a Batman tattoo on my arm. It's been covered up with something else now, but I used to have a Batman tattoo when I was 16.
Or shame, getting rid of it, dude.
Well, it's still there. It's underneath, but
it's there in here.
Dingo Dundee, thank you very much. He's enjoying the podcast. Thanks for the donation. But like I have loads of Batman comic books. Like Batman is my thing. I love the Batman movies. I don't think there's such a thing as a bad Batman film. There is good ones and then awesome ones, right? Batman's my thing. I could
Schumacher.
Yeah. I could never get into the Batman miniatures game. Because like through a number of different things, being like sort of quality control from I'll be honest, I tried getting back in kind of like 1.5 edition and stuff like that when it was still getting really badly translated from Spanish. There was all sorts of issues, I think, when I tried. but like there's been quality issues. There was such a pushback from purchasers, like consumers, from the quality issues from them. The fallout of the Harry Potter game with all the issues that Night Models had and everything else. So, do you still play Batman now, don't you?
Oh yeah, like I love it. Like I think it's an amazing game. It's an incredible game. It's a game that I adore. It's probably my favorite miniature war game of all time, Andy. Right. And I have never recommended it to a single person.
So my point was going to be, right, is why is that not took off the way Marvel has? Because I love Marvel.
There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons for it. So firstly, what I was going to say, it's not marketed at all, right? Like, so it doesn't get marketed. And I actually think that you find this traditionally from a lot of Spanish companies. Night Models are Spanish, and they do run into the language barrier issue. And I actually think that Corvus Belli had this issue for a while as well, where their communication was very poor with their communities. Corvus Belli have gotten better though, and I think that their marketing of War Crow is exactly what I would be doing. And in fact, I think that they're doing really good. They're making really fun YouTube videos first, and then they're going, haha, but this is about a miniature game you don't know about.
Community focused, aiming it at the market, not at trying to have big brands.
Creating good content online is exactly how you do it. Okay, creating good content. But for Night Models, they traditionally didn't do a lot of a lot of marketing, you know, and they struggled with that side of things. Like you said, they had bad quality control. There's bad word of mouth about Night Models products for sure, like bad word of mouth, and for good reasons too.
Yeah, the
products that they put out were subpar, or they had issues, missing parts. The molds were bad, and they have slowly gotten better over like the last 7 years, to the extent where now I'm not nervous when opening up a box from Night Models. And the box actually arrives most of the time. So but that was a big problem. Like over COVID, that was a massive problem for them. Trying to get actual products into the hands of customers was a huge issue.
Missing parts, and then not following up with missing parts was something I used to hear about all the time.
Yes, they've gotten a ton. Okay, so I'll say this much. They have gotten far better at responding to these sorts of issues. Like if you are missing a thing, if you email them, they don't even ask questions. They just send it out to you. Like, so they're really good at that. They're really good at that side of things. Also, products have begun to arrive. They had a really frosty relationship with retailers for the longest time, because retailers struggled to get product. Like they would let consumers pre-order product at the retailer store, and then the product would just never arrive at the stores. They burned a lot of bridges in America. They're slowly trying to build this up again. I think they've hired some new people, which is honestly, I think, exactly what they needed to do. They needed to get someone in. They needed to get a product manager in, Andy, in order to actually sort this out, to basically work at it. There has been no company in the world where I have ever said, you know what this company needs? This company needs some executives, except for Night Models. Night Models has needed an executive, someone to actually get them organized, and they're starting to do that.
That's cool.
They also have had bad resin. I think they have bad quality resin, which they improved on, and now they're going to COcast. So that's good. The new COcast models are pretty good.
I've not seen any of those yet. Just one thing.
They're good.
James Bray is saying James Bray in the chat saying, not the cast of characters in Batman game you have in Marvel Crisis Protocol. The difference is, James, is that the Batman game still kind of delves into the DC universe as well. And like they're aware that I think the difference is, I think what Disney have done with Marvel is they've given a lot of kind of characters that nobody had ever heard of. They've given them a bit of airtime. You have so many characters in the DC universe that, through lack of not being in movies and stuff like that, people are generally not that aware of. But for me, I always feel like that, and this is probably not right, but I always feel like DC always feels that little bit more grounded in a reality. Marvel's much more fantastical for me. As much as I enjoy Marvel, DC's always been my preferred.
I mean, obviously, I think that the extended DC universe is probably at a power level, I suppose, higher than that of Marvel. But in terms of Batman to me is not a superhero story. Batman to me is a noir story, which is very colorful. I like the detective elements. That's why I love the Batman, because it's all about like people punching each other, and that actually does damage. Like when someone throws a punch or hits Batman with a crowbar, I know it hurts. But when I'm watching general like Marvel movies, it's like I'm like whatever. Like, oh no, the Hulk got thrown through a building. Who cares? Like that.
It's like, exactly right.
There's no danger level to me. So the thing I love about the Batman miniatures game is that it is at that it's at the gang level. You're not playing as like all of the superheroes versus all of the supervillains. You're playing as the Joker. And he might have brought with him like 6 guys. One of them has a crowbar. One of them has a knife, right? And they're gonna run around and they're gonna do things that one of the things I love about the game, which is their own specific mechanics. So every single faction comes with their own set of cards that are objective cards. And those objectives are special to that faction. So if I'm playing the Riddler, I'm playing objective cards where I'm putting down riddles for my opponent to resolve. I'm creating puzzles on the board that my opponent has to do. And that's how I get points, by tricking them into doing my puzzles incorrectly. And then I'm like, yes, haha, you fool. I feel smarter than you now. Or if you're playing as the Joker, you get encouraged to have your guys get defeated. You want your guys to get blown up and poisoned and stuff because you don't care, because you're the fucking Joker, baby. If you're playing as organized crime, you're trying to kill your opponent and you're trying to cover up the evidence for it as well and pay respects to the dawn. And if you're playing as Batman, your goal is to arrest the supervillain on the opponent's side. And as the cops, you're trying to gather clues and evidence and secure the perimeter. You're trying to get models moved to the edges of the map so that no one can escape the perimeter zone. It's such a unique game in that respect. There is no game that I've ever played that has been so... Everyone is playing their own kind of thing, and they interact in this very interesting way. And for that reason, it's why it's one of my favorite miniature war games. I play a lot of miniature war games. It's one of my favorite because it's so imbued with theme and with it's so evocative of the setting. It's just a lot of fun. I really do love it.
I like the sound of that. It didn't used to have that kind of mechanic, did it? Where everybody had individual. No, I don't remember. I was going to say I don't remember that. Yeah,
it's the new edition.
Maybe I have to give that a try then, because I do like the sound of that. And
here's the thing, right? Yeah. I always had for the longest time they didn't have the starter set like available to buy for 3rd edition, which was just like the death knell of the game. There was a while I covered nothing but Batman minis, and I was like, this is the biggest problem ever made. Like, what the hell? You can't have a game without a starter set. Like, no one is playing. The game is going to die. Like, what are you doing? So they have a starter set out now. The older starter set is now available to buy as well. Yeah. So they've definitely got their ship in order. So a lot of the problems that we were seeing have been fixed. The problem with kind of some of the translations and the rules, some of the rules aren't that intuitive. There is a big effort right now where they've brought on English-speaking fans to create like a 3.5 rules compendium to make it more kind of understandable just for English speakers. So yeah, I would definitely, I'm actually kind of comfortable recommending the game a little bit now. But it's a huge IP, like you said, and it has not broken through. I would say it's a super niche game, like an incredibly niche game.
It's weird, isn't it?
Not even Batman can do it, you know.
I know, I could. Yeah, even that way. Yeah. James
Sorry,
Bray,
you got me on a bit of a tangent there. I talked about Batman minis game.
I love Batman stuff. James Bray, thanks for the donation, mate. He says, I've got 16, deal has 10, hit or stick. Always hit on the 16, mate. Always hit on 16.
You were teaching me BlackJack.
I know. I was. You didn't see me manage to claw back my losses and escape on even money when I got out that night.
For those who don't know, when we met each other at UKGE, we ended up going to a casino and playing blackjack. It felt so appropriate.
We did. We went and we sat and played. Yeah, and you managed to win a couple of quid, didn't you? You were all right.
I doubled my money, and I was like, I'm done. I doubled my money. I knew when to quit. I was out.
Yeah. Night. Nicely done. Let's have a little look at the chat. There's so many stuff here. I've skimmed over a little bit. Normally, I let the chat kind of drive me a little bit when I'm flagging. You know, when I'm running out of energy, somebody just throws a question in there, and I go, "Oh yeah, that gives me something." But tonight, it's been nice to be able to chat to somebody else, and that's keeping me going as well. But yeah, so I apologise if I've missed anybody's comments here, but there is a lot of stuff in the chat here. I'm just kind of having a little look through here. VJ, who's currently sitting, I think he's in. So VJ is from Australia. He's been to the UK this last week on holiday. He's actually just flew out yesterday, I think, to Egypt for a bit of a break, and then he's coming back. He's coming back to the UK at the weekend, and he's coming up here to play some games at the weekend. And he's saying when he was in Nottingham last week, he was at Warlord, and they've got some Siocast stuff, so he'll show me what that looks like.
Hold the phone to our Warlord getting on in Siocast as well.
It appears so, yeah.
Okay. What's your opinion on Siocast? What's your opinion on it? Because I'm a little bit nervous.
I thought you were going to see what's my opinion on Warlord there. What's the whole different ball game?
Is that a spicy question?
Not really. I'm just not really into historical stuff at all. So Siocast, well, do you know what it is? It feels like everyone's getting excited about it because it's essentially it's halfway.
So good for the manufacturer, right?
Yeah, it's halfway between resin manufacturing and plastic injection molding, isn't it? So it's the best of both worlds. You get plastic models, but you kind of, you're essentially still resin casting.
Yeah.
And whilst I wouldn't say it was affordable, it is more affordable than plastic stuff.
We're still talking hundreds of thousands for a single machine. But
exactly. So I would assume it's not something that a lot of companies are going to invest in quickly. But I'm yet to see it in the flesh. I haven't had any in my hand yet, so I can't really comment on that. But from what I've seen, everyone's raving about how it's kind of like, the quality's fantastic and all this kind of stuff.
It feels nice.
I think quality is always fantastic when it's the first ones out of a mold. It doesn't matter whether it's metal, it doesn't matter whether it's resin. The first ones out, and those were the bits that everybody is seeing. Let's have a look and see what they're like after they've done a few spins, and we're starting to get those ones out. And that's when it goes into full production. That's what because I know
I agree with you. Yeah, I think we both agree on this.
I know quite a bit about like injection molding and stuff like that. I could because randomly I used to in my history of jobs I used to work for a wine bottling company. So we used to bottle wine, and I used to have to go and visit our bottle manufacturer, and you essentially blow glass bottles in dyes in a very similar way that you do plastic injection molding. And so I know a little bit about the dye system and designing the dyes and all the different bits and pieces and stuff like that. But they made of steel. Like the plastic does not wear away the steel, where these are more kind of like the rubbery kind of spin plates, aren't they? A bit like resin. So we shall see. Because it's as long as you can get a good number of spins out of each one before you need to replace it, it becomes cost effective. But if you start chewing it up, like as you're pulling them out, we'll see.
This is my huge. I have a huge concern about Siocast. I'm worried about too many companies jumping on it and long term and not working out. Here's the thing, right, about Siocast. It's proprietary, and that makes me really nervous whenever a single company owns the means of production. It's very dangerous.
And the material that goes in it.
And the material that goes inside it. And whenever you start to, maybe in like 5 years when they've cornered the market and everyone's moved over to this more cost-effective way, the prices start to go up and we start to see companies getting squeezed for cash. I'm really concerned about that long term. But on the other hand, I mean, the Siocast models themselves that I have handled are very nice. Like they're nice to handle. Do you ever take 3D print a model and you've used your resin and you touch it, it's got that little, it hasn't quite worked out well. It's not very pleasant to touch. Yeah. Siocast is like the complete opposite of that. It's very nice. It's just hard where it counts, like plastic. Yeah. But it kind of, you can see that the depth of detail in it is very good. So night models have moved to that. Is why it just came to mind. But I'm sort of, I'm nervous about the long term about it. I'm nervous about the long term, honestly.
I think it's interesting what you say there. There seem to be a lot of companies all kind of jumping on it in a very short period of time when nobody's gone to market with a full range yet.
Yeah.
Like where's the proven technology, if you like?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of Spanish companies have gone to, because Siocast themselves are a Spanish company. I think they basically did like a big tour of Spain, like maybe last year, and they signed a lot of contracts with a lot of companies. So I think we're going to see a lot more of them soon, like a ton more. Like I think in Corvus Belli, aren't they moving fully to Siocast?
They are.
For Warcrew, certainly, and then for the larger models in Infinity, I think, as well.
Yeah, because so Corvus Belli used to always be all metal. Yeah. Then when Aristea came out, they got plastic figures from China. So but they used to do all of their metal models internally. So their quality control was pretty good, to be fair. and they were never really happy with the plastics, I think.
Yeah.
They've had some plastics manufactured for when they did Defiance, which was their kind of their dungeon crawler thing that they did on Kickstarter.
Sure.
Those were plastics. And then they announced, I think they might have been the first ones to announce they were going to Siocast or Seocast.
Yes, I think they were. I think they were, actually.
And then that was kind of the first time I'd heard of it. And then I started hearing it splattering about. But you're right, it is a lot of kind of Spanish companies. I wonder whether they're investing in the equipment or if they're using Siocast in Spain to do manufacturing for them to initially.
Oh, I thought they were buying the equipment, but I never actually thought about it because I know that at trade shows and stuff, they've been like Seocast have been there selling the equipment. I just assumed that it was the same sort of relationship, but I maybe not, right? Maybe it is a sort of.
It's quite a big investment, though, isn't it? Like it's a big leap.
Oh yeah. It is. Like I've seen some smaller, like kind of mini manufacturers, like really small, like Heresy Miniatures.
Yeah.
They were looking into maybe getting a Seocast thing. It's kind of like oh no, I cannot afford this. There is no chance. Like it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there are very few companies who have plastic manufacturing, but War Cradle's one of them. And randomly, they do their own plastic manufacturing, and the quality is fantastic, mind. I mean, like it, whether you play the games or whether you like the models or whatever, is a completely kind of.
Our Mythos models, are they?
Mythos is a resin.
Okay.
Wild West Exodus are resin, but all of Dystopian Wars are plastics. Well, I see it all. The odd one or two bigger models are resin still, but there's a lot of
Sure.
And the new Wild West Exodus starter set was all plastic as well, and it's all in-house manufactured plastic.
Well, that's Wayland, right? Like War Cradle and Wayland.
Yeah. So it's interesting that they obviously went down that route of buying their own machinery, which is which another thing I want to talk about, which is probably a good point to talk about, is I never understand how big like the reaches for a certain game. So if you take Wild West Exodus as an example, I've played it. I quite like the game. I think their miniatures are fantastic. The quality for resin stuff is fantastic. The quality for plastic stuff, it's fantastic. But I've got no idea how big it is. I don't really ever hear anybody playing it. I don't see any pictures online unless I go to a specific group. And yet here you have a company who are investing in plastic manufacturing. Like they used to throw money like at their marketing for a good couple of years when they first bought it from Outlaw Miniatures. Like you couldn't move for advertising.
When I order anything from Wayland, it always comes with like pamphlets from Wild West Exodus. That's the reason why I know about it, is because I can't get these pamphlets for Wild West Exodus. Like, fine, I'll look at this cowboy game.
but it makes me wonder, like, how are these games just so, like, are they much bigger than we see online? And do they have like a big audience that basically just never interact online and never talk, or do they make more money than we think they do, or what? Like, I wonder what it is.
That one.
Yeah,
I think they do. So the margins on plastic are really good. Like, they're really good. It's the only way. Like, I mean, if you have the ability to create your own miniatures as opposed to just simply selling, for example, 3D sculpts, then like by all means go for it, because you'll be able to sell the miniatures for so much more than 3D STL files and make so much more money. That's kind of what I was advised. So like this is definitely the case where the profit margins are really high on plastic. Plastic is really cheap. Now, obviously, there's a huge initial expense. Like,
and that's the thing.
Massive investment for sure.
But this comes back to the point I was making, was like that there's a break-even point where making it in plastic is the better choice. Like, so like are they selling way more than I ever think they are? Like, do you know what I mean?
About that. Yeah, because I don't know anybody who plays it either. This is the thing. Like, I've been actually doing this a lot. I've been asking about Horse Heresy. This is kind of really interesting. So I've been asking about Horse Heresy, the new big game from Games Workshop. I don't know a single person who plays it. So I'm really curious, like, who's it? How successful is this game? Some people are like, oh, it's really super successful. Like, my local game store has sold like 30 copies and everyone's going to buy a set, 2 copies each. And then other people are like, literally, my store is sitting now. It has massive piles of Horse Heresy starter sets. Nobody wants it. And I think it's very variable. It's very geographical like you might have this huge community down in like, I don't know, like the south of England or something, they're all really into Wild West Exodus and they're buying enough to sustain. Like, for example, I'm almost 100% sure that night models were surviving off of like 7 people buying models for like a year there. I don't know what the actual books look like for a lot of these companies because they are private companies, so I don't know what they need to actually sustain themselves.
That's exactly the point I've got. I was quite surprised when I found out that like Corvus Belly have been going for something like 12 years or something like that.
Yeah,
and they've essentially survived off Infinity. Like, it's not like they've got like 10 different games that they sell. It's only more recently they've had like Aristia, and they've done some of the Kickstarter stuff, and they're looking at this new fantasy game. But like like they've managed to like even Infinity, it's relatively popular. You see it getting played and stuff, but you won't walk into like every gaming store and see it being played. It's not in the same context as something like sort of 40k, obviously. And it makes me wonder, just like sort of what's the
hold on, Andy. You talk to all these people all the time. You talk to people like Mantic and stuff. Why don't you ask them? Why are you asking me?
Because no, I'm just throwing you a question. I know because I don't know whether it's just like I don't think you ever really kind of get to find out. Like is selling 10,000 copies good going? Is selling 5,000 copies good going? Like, do you know what? Like, because it's
the degree of success is much smaller. You can kind of get a little bit of an idea for it. Whenever you see things like Mantic, for example, we're doing their summer campaign for Firefight, where they basically do like you play. It's like the old Eye of Terror campaigns for Warhammer, where you play games, and then if you succeed your games, you're like fighting for your faction, right? And then you kind of measure up. And literally, you're talking about there's like 500 people, I think, taking part in that which is an unfathomably small amount of people for like a big product. Like, I would call them Mantic Games are like one of the bigger companies in the industry, and Firefight is probably one of the more well-known games in the industry, and there's very few people playing that. But the thing is that people who see, this is why Games Workshop monetize the same people over and over again, because the actual audience, like the size of people who are playing the games, are very low. As a hobby, miniature wargaming is not the most accessible. Like, it's kind of like a perfect storm. You need to have a lot of money, sort of. Like, if you're in Games Workshop, you need to have a lot of money. You need to be able to paint. You need to be able to build. You need to have the space to do that. You need to have other people to play with. Like, there's a lot that goes in. This is not turning on the TV and just sitting back and relaxing. Like, this is an active participatory hobby. It's not just like simply consumed. It's art in a lot of ways, and that's hard. That puts a lot of people off.
Oh, I agree, yeah. I mean, MMCD333 in the chat here saying, so I think regarding success, people playing is not a great indicator of success. And I would agree with that. But if people are buying stuff and then never, ever doing anything with it, like that feels like a sales model that is doomed. Or does it become that like the Sky TV leaking bucket thing, and like as long as you keep getting new people in, you're not too worried about the people that have already paid for it, kind of thing.
That is the business model for Games Workshop, though. It is the leaky bucket. Like, it is. It's the basically they try to fill it up incidentally, but people are always leaking out, and I guess the hope is for the rest of the hobby is that some of those people who are leaking out of the bucket are falling into other games as opposed to simply out of the hobby entirely. But I would warrant that most people who get fed up with Games Workshop just leave forever, or they get other responsibilities, like they get like jobs and like families and things like that. They're like no longer able to just hobby all day.
or they wait for Necromunda to come back, they wait for Blood Bowl to come back, they wait
for Horus Heresy, which I think is the reason Horus Heresy exists, I think, is to capture that market of disaffected Warhammer 40k players. What happens when Warhammer 40k, like 9th edition, is like the worst, is like the edition that everybody has all agreed, every single person who played it has agreed it's not very good. And what happens? We get a new edition of 7th edition Warhammer 40k with reactions, some innovation in the game design that have been cribbed from other games. But good, like at least they're making some changes. And Horus Heresy is I'm going to be honest, Horus Heresy is the most consumer-friendly game the Games Workshop have made in a long time. And I'm saying that in quotation marks because compared to other companies, it's not at all.
Yeah.
But it's just every single time I point out something bad about Horus Heresy, I'm told, oh, but this is incredible. It's never been this good before. It's like, yeah, okay, you're starving to death. I've given you like some rubbish moldy bread, but it's still moldy bread. Like, no one's going to be excited about this. You're not going to be like, yes, I get moldy bread this Friday. I can't wait. Anyway... I guess if you throw a Space Marine helmet on top of it, people will eat it because fucking people love Space Marines. But in any case, it is right. They're actually releasing they're e-publishing the rulebook. That's incredible, right?
Yeah.
For Games Workshop, that's actually amazing.
That's
They're
a step
releasing
forward.
a digital
Yeah.
version of their rules. Oh my god, they are releasing free units. The rules for units for free on Warhammer Community and free scenarios. This is all good. They have actually produced a box set that has some people calling it good value. Not me, but some people are calling it good value. And so, like, great. Of course, you got to remember that the good value is 6 sprues of the CM5 monopose models over and over and over again. All those Warhammer, all those miniatures, all those Space Marine guys, they are all the CM miniature, like 5 times, and that's it. Like, of course it was good value. It's like cheaper than a Perry box to produce. Perry box produces £22. At least all the models are fucking different in that one. Sorry. But yeah, Horus Heresy, is good value, I guess, for a Games Workshop product, I suppose.
I think it's good value if you used to play Horus Heresy and you used to play on Forge World prices. That's the problem.
Yeah, everything looks good beside Forge World. Like, I've always wanted a Deathcore of Krieg army, but I've never been able to afford one. Like, no matter what job I get ever, I will never be able to afford a Deathcore Krieg army. Like, I don't know who the hell's buying that. Like, I seriously don't. Like, people who own yachts, I'm guessing.
and just using them for ballast, just to kind of wait out the, what can I have all this money, what can I spend? I know, I'll buy some Deathcore.
I say things like, I don't know, like, I think £30 for 20 weapons is a really bad deal. Like, in a historical game, or like, if you look at the old State Troopers for Warhammer Fantasy, like, they had loads of options, but you know what happens? The weapon sprues that are their options came in the box with the models. Like, this is so innovative, I guess. Whereas Horus Heresy, it's sold differently. But I'm coming from that perspective, and I'm saying that's expensive. But there are people who are playing playing Horus Heresy are saying, well, actually, we're used to paying £15 for 5 resin weapons. So actually, 20 weapons for £30 is incredible. Like, that's really good. And I can see that perspective. Like, I understand that point. Like, I'm not like an idiot. Like, I get that it's a better deal than it was before. And I think that does deserve some level of appreciation. They get this. There, they got a clap, right? They get a clap for that because it's like the barest minimum. What they should have done was just put the actual fucking weapons inside the box. Sorry. Anyway, you got me stuck talking about Horus Heresy.
Did I press the run button there? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's too easy these days. It really is.
No, but to be fair, I mean, you're absolutely bang on with it. I mean, it's like, it's wrong to expect people to have to buy like upgraded weapon packs, and especially in resin for that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I hate the precedent that sets. I don't like the idea of like having to buy upsells. I've hated the upgrade sprues as well for the same reason. I should get everything inside the box. Like they're making a lot of money on these models. I should be getting everything in the box.
It almost feels like some kind of like weird microtransaction type thing. Like, it's almost a case of like, also you've bought the models, but if you want the cool weapons, like, they're going to cost you extra kind of thing.
But it all comes from the same source of trying to sort of eke out that little extra cash, you know? It's the same for like video games where they're selling cosmetics. Those cosmetics used to do cheat codes and get those cosmetics for free, right? It used to be just fun things they'd add to the game because it was fun. That was the value of it. It was just fun. But then they realized they could charge you for it. And now, so Games Workshop, instead of, say, bringing out a new Imperial Guard infantryman sprue, they're like, how about the upgrade sprue? We can, like, make people pay more for that. Like, we can make people pay more to have a slightly better looking model. Like, why don't we just do that? And I get why they would do it, but again, like, I'm consumer first. I'm not dev first. I'm not going to accept this chicanery. That's what it is. It's chicanery.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're talking about kind of like sort of pulling in those kind of lost souls and bringing them back. We got the Warhammer announcement thing coming up this weekend. Skirmish stuff, isn't it, that they're talking about? Looks like there's a new new Warcry coming. Have you played much Warcry?
I haven't. I actually, so, Gives Worship are about to earn another clap here in a second. So, I haven't played Warcry, but I did actually buy a starter set. I bought the one where there's like all the lava, I think, and it's like the kind of underground kingdom. I played
Catacombs.
that, or I haven't played it. I haven't even opened it, but I bought it because it was actually on sale on the Games Workshop store for like the first time I've ever seen a sale. Last time as well, I've ever seen a sale. So they get again, but that was, I had to buy it for the novelty of the thing, and I've heard good things about Warcry, but I haven't played it. Honest, I haven't.
Warcry, in my opinion, Games Workshop's best ever game by some margin.
Oh, really? Have you played the Battle for Middle Earth miniatures game?
I've tried it. I don't like it.
Oh, you don't like oh, no way, because I think that's the best game.
Also factor in mind, which might taint my opinion, I'm not a fan of Lord of the Rings, to be fair. So I don't have. No, I know. So I and that's the end of the stream for tonight, folks.
The table and move on. What the hell? Hold on, let's back up a sec.
Let's just say I only watched the films in the last few years because people on the chat were giving me grief when I haven't seen them. So I just never got round to it. It wasn't really something I was like. And my takeout from the Lord of the Rings films were, yeah, not for me. But they haven't aged well, kind of thing. But and I appreciate that is not a popular take.
Oh, I'm gonna have to unfollow you on Twitter after this. Hold on.
So anyway, getting back to my point, Warcry, best Games Workshop game, I would say. Now my worry is
I've heard good things about it. I have heard good things about it.
They're going to screw around with it because they're not going to just kind of repackage the rules. Yeah, they're not going to just repackage the rules in a new box, are they? We're getting a new setting, so it's going to, where is it? Is it Gua or whatever it's called? Where the beasts are. So it's moving from the old points to this new location. I'm hoping
hold on. Is Warcry taking place in the Age of Sigmar setting?
Yeah. But it takes place.
I guess I never thought about it.
It's quite clever, right? So what they've done is it takes place in a place called the 8 Points, which is kind of like the areas between the big cities, and essentially what you've got of these kind of like little kind of almost chaosy kind of warbands who are touched by the chaos gods, but aren't necessarily like aware of the chaos gods. And they're being kind of corrupted in their own different ways. And when Warcry was just that, it sounded perfect. And then they went on and have some Stormcast and have some Fire Slayers and have
And I actually really like that idea, like that more constrained, that more limited idea of it being these tribes. Because whenever I saw, one of the things I like about the game is the faction variety seemed really interesting. It seemed like they were trying to kind of capture what made Necromunda so good.
I was going to say it felt like a really simplified fantasy Necromunda for me when it first kind of came out.
Yeah, and then they had to do that thing where people were like, I want to play the Storm Marines. And so they had to give them their, the Stormcast Eternals because people wanted to play Stormcast Eternals, I guess,
I just wanted it to stand on its own as its own little separate game. It didn't need to be pulled in. Anyway, that's just my little rant. Sure. But my worry is... I
agree with you.
My worry is it's a great game, and they're gonna screw it up because they're not gonna change it for the better because there's not really much wrong with it. Really, it's not everybody's cup of tea. I appreciate that. It's probably not the most competitive of games, but not every game needs to be a competitive game. Like some games can just be fun to play, kind of thing. And my worry is that they'll try and complexify it, for want of a better word. There you go.
No, I don't know if I'd be worried about that. What I would expect, honestly, maybe they'll do the Ash Waste thing where they just kind of release. Like, maybe you're going to be seeing, like, I guess maybe not. Okay, so I was going to say there that you might see, like, a $300 box set come out with, like, a new sort of edition of the game that's kind of like a soft, relaunch of the game in a lot of ways. But I don't know if they will do that, because I think they did that with Necromunda, because Necromunda is perceived of, if you ever look at their sort of internal reports, which I have, they actually... in all their marketing to retailers, not to customers, to retailers, all their communication with retailers, they talk about Necromunda as an expert level game. So Necromunda is for the hobbyist who is already in the game ecosystem or has been for a long time and isn't really a fan anymore, but they'll play Necromunda because Necromunda is like awesome and old school. And so they know they can monetize them for more.
I was going to say it, and it is priced at that level exactly as well. It's not priced to bring new people into the game. It's priced for people that have always played it for years and have come back and want to see it again.
Exactly. Whereas Warcry, I think, is perceived to be more of a kind of introductory product. I think it's meant to be more casual friendly.
Yeah,
this is someone, I'm an outsider to this. Like, I have no idea about the gameplay.
And it absolutely is.
A more casual audience.
Yeah, it absolutely is from a rules perspective wise. I mean, it is a lot more straightforward.
So maybe it will be just a complete new edition then. Because that seems like an easier, thing to do if you're kind of expecting it to actually get sales from people who don't know much about Games Workshop stuff. And then you're probably gonna find things you don't like. For sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's inevitable.
And then we've also got Kill Team Space Hulk, whatever it appears to be as well, coming as well. Yeah, that'll be.
I know what it is.
You do. Yeah.
It's Kazarkin versus Gene Stealer cultists.
Yeah,
it's just Gene Stealers.
So it's essentially another Kill Team expansion, isn't it?
Yeah.
But like inside a unit, inside like a kind of like a Space Hulk type floating ship.
Which is good because all the other Kill Teams have basically been in the same place. Like Kill Team's been interesting. So they started off at the very beginning and they were kind of like, welcome to the new version of Kill Team. It's going to be taking you across the galaxy on an adventure. And they were kind of doing that. They plugged every quarter. There was going to be like a new box set you could give them $200 and have a lot of fun. And then what it has really been, it's been repackaged terrain that already exists that they're just like getting rid of like a bunch of their extra stock.
Yeah.
They've thrown on some like desert boards and one new complete new unit and then one like just upgrade sprue. I've been like, there you go. Enjoy. And some of that has been good. Some of it has been bad. Like, I'm a big fan of the new Trader Guard that just came out there for it.
They do look cool, actually.
Yeah, they look pretty cool. Not so much the Space Marines, though. They're lame, as per usual. And that's been fine, okay? That's been fine. I'm not a big fan of that business model. I don't like this kind of coming back to the well over and over again for a sip, Like, oh, you got to buy another big box set, these huge bundles. Then it's like a month. You got to wait like a month, and then they all come out like separately, like in some indeterminate time. But at least this time, it's looking like they're making a bit of a change in that it's on a Space Hulk of some kind, which means that we might see something like the Zone Mortalis terrain from Necromunda, if you remember that, being the sort of 2D boards where you were kind of playing on this very constrained landscape. And it was all about this kind of like maze, I think that could work really well for like a Space Hulk sort of game. Maybe we see some sort of terrain like that as opposed to the big. I'd
like to see that, but from experience, we had Kill Team. I forget what it was called now. Not Kill Team 2021. There was a 2018 or something. That version came out very quickly. Behind it, there was a Kill Team launch, which was basically inside a spaceship. And I'm trying to think what it was called now. Somebody in the chat is bound to tell me. But then Simon with David there is saying as well as Arena. That's what I was going to mention was the next one. Arena was like another one which was basically designed for competitive Kill Team, which had sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like basically mirror images across the board. Yeah. What's that? So the setup was basically balanced kind of thing, that kind of thing.
Symmetrical, you're saying.
Symmetrical, that's the word I couldn't think of, yeah. Okay. But both of these basically just had like black lines on for walls where you were playing down corridors, and they never did release any kind of terrain like that for it. Now, I'd like to see that kind of thing, and it'd be interesting because Kill Team is a game that is played in like sort of verticality as well. So to see how they cope with that, or it should be, is that
kind of is. Yeah. I've got a problem. I've got problems with Kill Team. Like I'm not like I didn't write off the game. I was actually really excited to play.
Rogue Trader, that's what it was. Kill Team Rogue Trader. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, of course, Rogue Trader. I remember that actually. That had a really cool Rogue Trader crew. But anyway, I was really excited
to play Kill Team, because it looked like Games Workshop were finally innovating, and they were actually kind of removing themselves from their standard, oh, you got to roll to hit, you got to roll to wound, and then you got to roll an armor save. Like that's Games Workshop product, right? That's Games Workshop game design. But with Kill Team, it looked like they were kind of moving away from that. There was a lot more. It was just a completely different system. And I was really excited for that. And in terms of the gameplay, I think the game's fine. I think it suffers from terrain rules there's a lot of terrain rules. It's kind of awkward. There's a lot of stuff you got to remember. And I hate all that kind of bookkeeping. And the melee's kind of fun, though. I kind of like the mini game that you play in Melee. One of my big problems with the game, though, is that I am a big campaign player. I love campaign systems. I absolutely adore them. I love having reasons to play the games. You know, I love to have an excuse to play the games, and I love those games having some sort of impact on a wider meta level. But Kill Team's campaign system is actively the worst campaign system I have ever played in any game ever. And the reason for that is that it tried to copy the Crusade system from 40K, which is in its own right pretty innovative and pretty interesting, where it's not based on like a meta map or, you know, you're trying to capture territory. It's based on your gang, you know, your warband, your army. You are trying to level up. You're trying to complete objectives that are specific to you. You know, like you're the Imperial Guard. You're trying to, like, I don't know, like get 10 of your guys killed because you're the Imperial Guard. You got quotas to reach or something. And so your goal in the games is like to try and get 10 people killed. That's all you care about. The big problem with that, though, is the Kill Team is a mission-based game. So you're meant to go in and try and complete the mission. But if you're playing the campaign, you literally don't get rewarded for winning the missions at all. You get rewarded for doing your meta objectives, which will often mean that you're better off not going
winning.
after the mission, not doing the missions. And that killed the game for me. Like, it literally just like, boom, I did that and was like, oh my God, like this is a fatal flaw.
Doesn't make any sense, does it?
Yeah. And it has never been addressed. It's never been resolved. I think people who play Kill Team these days are mostly playing like individual single shot games in a kind of I think the game's being treated pretty competitively, honestly.
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
But it has killed the game for the narrative level of the game for me, which is I haven't played it at all. Like, I have the Orc Commandos, I have the Deathcore Krieg, and I haven't picked it up in months, absolute months. So I'm excited to see what they come out with, but mostly from the perspective of the sculpts. Really, to be honest, I'm just a curiosity just to see what it is all about, because they are good at their marketing, Games Workshop. They are good at that.
And it is a great way to bring in, and let's be honest, what they use these big box sets as volume drivers to bring in new models, because then they can mass produce them, and then all of a sudden those dies are bought and they go through the kind of the recycle of the churn of just like sort of fulfilling shelf lines after that. But it does give them the opportunity to bring in some quite interesting sculpts that wouldn't necessarily see a full army or like we got the Deathcore Krieg in plastic, which you know is something that people have been asking for like 100 years. So it was nice to actually see it, like actually be made. That's what got me to buy the box. It was on the back of the Deathcore Krieg. Like, as I said, like I've been wanting a Deathcore Krieg since I was a little girl. Like, I have not been able to ever afford it. This is like my one chance. This is my one time. And then lo and behold, they were all very monopose, and I didn't have any fun assembling them at all. Oh. So there we go, swings and roundabouts. There you go then.
Kind of a disappointment in the end.
So what's on your radar now then, games wise, from anybody? Is there anything you're looking at? Is there anything is there anything you're secretly painting away in the background, maybe thinking about playing soon? Or
I've been painting some Star Wars Legion models. Like, I don't want to play some more of that. I played a lot of that during the pandemic. I just haven't gotten around to it. Like, the funny thing about Star Wars Legion is that I would recommend, if anybody who's interested in a miniature war game, but they want an army level game, they want like army level, and they want a good game, I would recommend probably Star Wars Legion over Warhammer 40K, to be honest. I think Star Wars Legion is a really fun game. Not necessarily the most immersive thing in the world, but it's a fun game. It works really well, like on the table, and it's nice and competitive. It
feels like Star Wars, doesn't it? Though it feels like Star Wars.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think that the initiative system, the kind of command token system that it has, is really interesting. I think it's like a really clever piece of game design. Like, I'm always impressed when I go to play it. I don't know if they've made the best use of it, but I think that, like, as a mechanic, it's really fun.
It's going to be interesting to see what AMG do with it. Now they've had a little bit of time with it under their belt.
I don't know. I'm kind of a little bit nervous because I like Fantasy Flight games.
Yeah.
And I like MJ Newman and her design because I'm a big fan of the Arkham Horror card game just on the side.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of worried. I didn't like, and Look Eddie, I think is a very good designer. So I was kind of worried about it moving into another studio, and it felt like like AMG I don't think really wanted it either. Like, this was a decision made by Asmodee from a sort of purely operational perspective. Like, why don't we have all our miniature war games under the one roof? Put it all there. Because it was easier to bookkeep or something, you know? So that was a little bit nervous. I will say, though, I think that AMG so far, because I know that we've been mostly working through a lot of the old Fantasy Flight stuff.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into the era where we're starting to see some AMG things. I think that they're going to be a little bit more innovative, or at least a little bit less cautious in the sort of designs that they show off, right?
Yeah.
Because with Fantasy Flight, like, what did we get for Empire, like, in the first year? Like, snowtroopers?
Oh, it was one of the things that almost killed the game for me. It was essentially you could have white soldiers versus brown soldiers. Basically, that was pretty much it. That was the first like 3 or 4 releases.
And the thing is, right, I love the original trilogy. I'm not like a big fan of the prequels, but I do think it was foolish to make a Star Wars like miniature war game and not include a lot of the sort of extended universe elements. I think that was foolish. Yeah, but I mean, they're doing it now, right? And I think that Star Wars Legion is getting more popular. I think I've seen a lot of people talk about the Shadow Collective, which recently released.
Yeah.
So there's stuff happening. The launch of a new faction is always interesting, unless they're squats. You heard me.
I'm interested to see if they do anything along the lines of a Star Wars Marvel Crisis Protocol game, like the actual little kind of small skirmish scale size individual units.
But
yeah,
it's not,
but
it's
almost
like 500 points as opposed to 800 points. It's still an army level.
No, but I mean like individual, like take eight kind of models type of thing, 5 or 6 models, individual units.
Okay, now you're in charge. Do you make it so it's like Luke Skywalker and Leia and Yoda versus Darth Vader and the Emperor, or do you make it like original characters, like you've got like 3 rebel guys and a rocket dude? Like how would you do it? Would you do the characters? You've got
to do characters. You've got to do characters because you've got to get people to buy them. Marvel did the same thing. Yeah, Marvel did the same thing as well. And now we're starting to see the odd bits and pieces. Like there's a model which is like 3 shield agents together, which is kind of does something. But that's the first time.
Henchman models.
Yeah, it's the first time we've seen that. But I think people want to just do those big battles. They want the only thing I would say was in Marvel there is like there's lore, if you like, there's background of people switching sides and people who were heroes or were villains have switched sides and alliances and stuff. You don't really get that in Star Wars. And I think that was one of the issues we got in the early part of X-Wing. It was one of the things we got in the early part of Legion, was it was just like we've got 2 factions kind of thing. And it's nice to see them spread that out over the different like extended universe. But initially you just basically, it was just good versus bad kind of thing. And it's a bit flat for a miniatures game.
Like, I think that one of the things that actually I quite like about Legion is the limited factions. Like, I do think that, like, Warhammer 40k has too many factions.
Oh, I agree with that, yeah.
Far too much. Like, far too much. But, yeah, I think that, like, Empire or Rebels is probably not the extent to what you want, right? Like, you probably want a little bit more. I think they're starting to get to the stage, like 5 factions are good, and now they're doing these kind of sub-faction things where there's, like, the Wookiees, and the Wookiees kind of have this gameplay mechanics that only the Wookiees have, and they can be taken in the Rebels or the Republic. And then now you're gonna get the Ewoks. Everybody's looking forward to the Ewoks and their battering ram that they'll be able to bring to defeat the ATSTs. Come on, how can you not be excited for that?
James Bray's just donated there as well and says, "Give me Jar Jar or give me death." There you go. Charming. But yeah, I'm surprised they haven't milked that Star Wars sort of license a little bit more, especially with the uptake now as well, with all of the new Star Wars stuff coming to Disney Plus and stuff. I thought they would have milked that a bit harder. But we'll see. There's time.
There is. I think that I think that Star Wars Legion is going to get a new lease on life. I really do. I think that it's getting to the stage where it's getting bigger again. I do.
I'm a big Star Wars fan. I'll be honest. I do like Star Wars, but I have played Legion. I've got both of the the core sets, the 2 starter boxes for the thing. But I must admit, it's it was the initial Fantasy Flight's normal thing of not getting stock out at the right time, sort of delayed releases, all that kind of stuff. Kind of give it a bit of a slow start for me, I think.
Yeah, for sure, it's been tough.
Scython saying, I'm still convinced Jar Jar was supposed to be a Sith character, but was immensely unlike in the first movie, so they had to get rid of him. Well, we'll see what happens. There's always retcon, isn't it? I'm sure they'll do something with it. Anyway, we're getting up towards 11 o'clock, so I think we'll start to kind of round it off a little bit now. Because
we haven't even talked about Necromunda. We haven't even talked about Necromunda yet.
Let me talk about it for you. I don't like it very much.
Okay, that's really interesting, actually. So they have teased a few models,
right?
So the model designs look really interesting. Like, they look really funky. There's like a guy with big speakers for ears. There's like an agitator, and there is some sort of listener of some kind. So kind of interesting, like, model design.
Do you know? No, go on.
Well, I'm surprised, because I thought that everything was going to be ash wastes these days. You know, all the vehicles in the deserts, and it looks like they're going back to the hive.
Yeah, it's kind of it is kind of weird. It's almost like they took a bit of a left turn and then went, oh, hang on a second, let's just. But
can I tell you a secret?
Go on. Just me. Nobody's listening. Go on.
I don't think I like Necromunda anymore either. I love Necromunda, but as I've played more and more skirmish games, I've been like, hold on, actually, I think Necromunda isn't a very good game.
You know what?
It feels so sacrilegious to say.
I would happily take Necromunda, its models and its universe, and have a ported over Warcry game system, because Warcry is just so much more simple. Like, everything hits, right? Everything hits, but you've got loads of wounds. And for me personally, I like to switch around and play lots of different games, so the rule system doesn't need to be super crunchy and super bookkeepy and all that kind of stuff. I just want to have fun playing it. And if I'm playing a campaign, so much the better. But I don't want to have to spend more time keeping a track of all the information than I do actually playing and having fun. So for me, it's just, I love the universe idea. I love this idea of the Underhive and the kind of what's happening while people are kind of the Marines are dropping down and creating like war elsewhere. I love the idea of it. The game just doesn't live up to what I particularly like. That's all.
I absolutely adore the setting. Like, it's my favorite part of the 40k setting is the sort of hives and the gangs and stuff like, and the colorful characters that you get in them. You know, I love all that kind of warriors element, like all these different like criminal organizations all fighting one another. But I gotta say, like, in hindsight, we were crafting a lot of house rules for the most basic of things, like the core gameplay itself. Like, it struggles. It's a very unoptimized engine, shall we say, in terms, you know, like, it's very unfun. Like, there's a lot of unfun moments in that game where it's just like, it doesn't feel good. There's lots of feels bad moments. I think it gets carried a lot by how great a theme it has, like how evocative the setting is.
I've got a bit of a love-hate thing with house rules, right? Because I always feel that whenever you say something's not very good and people say, oh, well, you can just house rule it, it feels like the world's biggest Get Out. James Bray, thank you for the donation, mate. Necrofunda, he says.
I've never heard this pun before.
I know. I'm not against house rules in terms of it's your game, you do what you want with the rules, but I don't like the idea of house rules being used for bad design. Like, a game should be fun, and then you can add to it to make it even better if you want to. It shouldn't be a case of these rules are problematic and we need to house rule them to make the game work.
Well, it's the same way in that the only way that Necromunda is truly a playable experience is by using the fan rulebook, which is a free PDF.
Yeah.
Anyone out there who doesn't know, you can get a free PDF of all the rules of Necromunda. Google it, you'll find it. We're gonna get shut down soon. Google it, you'll find it, and it's all of the books together, but made coherent in a single PDF by fans. Go check it out. It's the only way to play Necromunda, like, for real, because otherwise you're flicking through like 6 different books, all trying to tell you 7 competing things. You're like, wait, which one's the more recent one? Which one stands up to scrutiny more? Which one, you know? Oh, where's the marketplace on this? Is it in book 3 or is it in book 12? I can't remember. Oh, it's in neither. It actually doesn't exist except for like a small PDF released by the Warhammer community like 7 months ago, or it was put in a White Dwarf.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
And like, you know, like it's a big problem, but you can't do that. But they don't get a pass because fans have sort of saved the day and created an actual code. It's the same way people are like, oh, well, you don't have to buy the codex. You can use you can use like fan websites. You can download the PDFs, but like they don't get a pass because of that, just because like other people have like done their job for them.
No, I'm 100% with that as well. Yeah, and when people say about the cost of things, and you go like codexes are really expensive, and people go, oh, you can get them for free. That's not like that's like saying, look at the price of Rolexes. Well, you can go and steal one. Like it's that's not the alternative. That's not the excuse. That's that kind of thing. Lord Maiden, thank you very much for the donation as well. He's saying, can Discourse come back another time, please? I don't know, can you?
Yeah.
Can you come back?
Yeah, I can come back again. I'm having a whale of a time. I'm having a ball.
Whenever we chat, we always have a good bit in that. I could talk to you forever. It's nice to talk games and talk industry and talk theories and
I love it.
Wild speculation. Yeah. No, I'll do it anytime.
100%.
Matt Lumley says Discourse and Andy is a weekly event. We'll just do a podcast there. Should we do a podcast? Yeah, we'll do that instead.
I mean, I don't have a podcast on the go.
No, I don't either. No. So there you go.
Maybe.
I've run out of things to listen to. So yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Just listen to yourself over and over, huh?
Yeah, it gets a bit dull though. I've heard it all before. But I think what we'll do is we'll wrap it up there and we'll call it an evening. Because I'm up early to take the little one to school in the morning. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It has been awesome. Always enjoy the chat.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I've had a real fun time. Thank you for having me on.
You are very welcome, and thank you to the chat as well. I appreciate. I've been a bit more preoccupied with a bit of banter tonight, but I'm sure you seem to have joined me for the full chat, and you don't seem to have kind of sort of been too bad. I think you've been chatting amongst yourselves, folks. So thank you to all my Patreons, thank you to the donators tonight as well, and I will see you all next Monday night when we'll have another guest actually next week, because we've got VJ here who's travelled all the way from Australia. So he's going to be on next week's live stream. So take care everybody, and I'll see you next time.